A new documentary called A Billion Lives examines smoking-related deaths, the tobacco industry, government, vaping, and a potential conspiracy. Joining me now is Biebert, director and executive producer of the documentary. We also have here David Gerlitz. You may remember him as the Winston Man. And we have Sally Sattel, a doctor who is a medical researcher. It's so good to have you all here, all playing a role in this documentary. So welcome. Aaron, let me start with you because I threw a lot at the top. So the premise of the documentary, explain that for us and what drove you to make it.
Well, I mean, when I heard this statistic that the World Health Organization projects that 1 billion people will die this century from smoking, and I had a colleague of mine die from lung cancer, and then I heard from some of my friends that they were quitting smoking using this vapor technology, but now that it's going to be banned, and the FDA is basically banning 99% of these products and doing all this crazy stuff, and I keep seeing all this negative publicity about it. I thought, what is going on here? This just doesn't make sense. So yeah, we decided to dig deep and make a movie about it, and that's what A Billion Lives is all about.
All right, Sally, let me go to you. What does your research tell you about the harm of smoking and tobacco versus vaping?
Well, there's no question that vaping is a disruptive technology. It is, according to the Royal College of Physicians, 95% less harmful than smoking. It doesn't burn tobacco, and that's really the problem. It's the so-called products of combustion that lead to tar and other toxins that cause lung cancer, COPD, other lung diseases, cardiovascular problems. And vaping, e-cigarettes, contains nicotine, which is not harmful to otherwise healthy people, and propylene glycol. In the short term, there's no risks to propylene glycol. We're not sure about long term. We have no reason to think there is, but that needs to be followed. But the key part is that compared to cigarettes, it's a relative risk. It is so much less risky. And frankly, everyone who smokes should be encouraged to switch.
All right, we're going to get more on the story in a minute, but I want to go to David. Weren't you the guy that told us to smoke cigarettes?
I was.
So how did you get involved in this whole thing?
1981 to 1988, I was the lead model for R.J. Reynolds' Winston campaign, and we were successful enough in associating smoking with healthy activity like mountain climbing, helicopter piloting.
Just
as what you want as 12,000 feet is be on top of a mountain and be a smoker. I got involved with this, and it's a long, long story, but I'm going to give you the thumbnail sketch. In 1988, after a successful 7-year run with R.J. Reynolds, moving Winston from number 4 to number 2 in sales, I decided I had to quit because my brother died of cancer. My kids were begging me to quit. I was of the new age where the children were coming home saying, you're going to die because this is what's happening. So I quit, but it took me forever and ever and ever. I quit and I cheated. I probably quit 12, 14 times. But I reverted back to when I was 14 because I would sneak it after I quit because it was the hardest thing I ever did. I worked for the anti-tobacco movement for about 16 years until they became as corrupt as the tobacco industry and big pharmaceutical companies, in my opinion, based on my knowledge. I was told by R.J. Reynolds it was my job to get replacement smokers who happen to be kids. 93% of smokers start under the age of 17. So certainly they are looking for that particular vulnerable market. And if you remember 13 and 17, to 17 is probably some of the worst times of your life as far as peer pressure and sociology and everything else. So I did that for the anti-tobacco movement, received the World Health Organization medal, got all these applause and cheers for my taking a stand against R.J. Reynolds, and then it all went kaplooey when the anti-tobacco side started to really come down on what I found to be a wonderful, viable miracle, which was the e-cig that was going to help people transition over on their own without being beat over the head anymore. And I thought it was ideal because 30 years people have been told you got to quit, you have to quit, you're going to die, you're a leper, you're a parasite, you're a drain on our medical system with lost productivity and medical costs. So I thought, well, this is going to be a piece of cake. And unfortunately, around 2006, they started to see the negative press that came along with the e-cigs.
So Aaron, let's go back to this idea of suppressing the vaping industry and a conspiracy, whether it is tobacco or pharma or the government. Why would they do that? Now, I know obviously tobacco companies want to make money and others do as well. But if you have all these people using e-cigarettes, I mean, that's a product. It's just, is it all about money?
Well, I mean, it's a lot of it's about money. I mean, it's not even really a conspiracy. They intercepted a memo from GlaxoSmithKline, who sells Nicorette gum here in the U.S., where they were lobbying against vapor technology to the European Parliament. I mean, this isn't even, we're not wondering if they're doing it. We've got full proof of this. So, and you look at it, they sell all the nicotine replacement products. They sell Chantix. They sell, all the other drugs basically to help people quit smoking, and not just Glaxo, but other ones as well. And these guys, of course, for business purposes, would like to have their competition harmed. This isn't even a question. This is how all businesses work, and we have proof that they've done that. They also fund all of the anti-smoking groups that David used to work for, and those groups are coming out with massively unscientific and fear-mongering garbage, and they're all being funded by these big pharmaceutical companies. So I would have to say in a lot of cases it's a lot about the money. There are some people that just that are outdated with their science. They don't know what they're talking about anymore, like the head of the CDC. This guy has no idea what nicotine is or he doesn't know the science about it. It's very clear what the science is, but he goes on television and he doesn't know what he's talking about.
All right, I must say I will have to take you at your word because I cannot defend either way. I don't know if that is a fact or not, so I just want to raise that before we slam them entirely. But you raised a very interesting point, and Sally, you can weigh in on this. What some people might not know is there are research studies. These just don't happen on their own. They are funded. So there are times where whoever is funding a study certainly would like to see a result. Not that they're tainting results, but clearly they are funding research that could explain something that might be beneficial.
Yes, research is supported, across the board, sometimes by industry, although far less so in this arena, because the tobacco companies are so villainized. When frankly, I think they probably could fund some quality research. But it's important to know a lot of that research is also being funded by the government, and it's also important to know that even without funding, people have ideologies that they come into research with. And some of them come in with a preset notion that anything that contains nicotine or something that's derived from tobacco is somehow suspect. They are so disproportionately worried about what will happen to children that they put all their emphasis on concerns about gateway to smoking, which is a reasonable thing to worry about. Gee, does vaping lead to smoking? Except now we have 6 years of data showing that is not happening. And yet, you mentioned the CDC. They continue to hammer that fear. A lot of researchers have reputations to protect, and that transcends funding.
Why wouldn't the government, though, want to show that vaping is beneficial? Because the cost to the government of smoking-related illnesses through Medicare, we know that there are connections. So
it's exceeded by the funds that they raise from the federal taxes that go into the federal government, along with the state taxes. It's a $500 billion a year industry. That's a lot of tax money going into the coffers, not to mention the lobbying of tobacco companies, which is right up there with the lobbying by big pharmaceuticals. We have 22 lobbyists for every senator and congressperson we have, 22 who are trying to buy their influence. And that's exactly what's happening, in my opinion.
Well, actually, I get no money from the tobacco companies, but they've been some of the innovators here. They
certainly appear to be trying.
Yeah, which is more than you can say about, frankly, some of the
more than you
government
can say about
agencies,
the
the
CDC or the
California
FDA.
Department of Public Health, the FDA, which is...
You look skeptical.
No, it's my job to be
crazy.
skeptical, so
I
that's
know.
why
You should be,
I have to challenge you, because I don't want statements
good
just to
journalism.
fly about.
If I could just say one thing,
Please.
because when I worked for R.J. Reynolds, I was told my job was to get kids smoking. I testified to that in Congress. When I asked the tobacco executives why they didn't smoke, they said, we don't smoke the stuff, we just sell it. We reserve that for the young, the poor, the black, and the stupid. Flag number one. They got caught. So of course they have to admit, because now we had corroboration. We also had documents brought in by Claude Teagues from R.J. Reynolds that said we must get the 14 to 17 market. We did nothing. The government gave up the right to control tobacco 45 years ago when Surgeon General Luther Terry said smoking kills. They did nothing until 2009. That's a lot of years, 45 years of doing nothing. And then in 2009, they say, well, let's control tobacco now. And they failed in anti-tobacco movements with kids smoking, because they still smoke at a rate of about 20%. The vaping industry comes along and said, well, there's our scapegoat. We can blame vaping for our failures in tobacco control. And that's what I'm talking about as being unfair.
Aaron, what do you hope this documentary will lead to? What do you want to accomplish from this?
Well, I think the key thing for me in making the movie is that we just have to reset the conversation, because, like you said, there's a lot of skepticism about it, and there should be. going in as I didn't know who I should trust either. Now here you have me sitting here saying that the head of the CDC doesn't understand nicotine, isn't uneducated about it, even though he goes on television. That is something you should be skeptical of me for saying it, but everybody needs to basically be, we need to reset the conversation because there's so much information out there and people are going off of very old information. They just keep carrying on this stuff like Sally was saying. A lot of this stuff has been researched and researched and researched, but they're going off of studies from 6 years ago instead of the new stuff. And they just keep hammering that. It makes me very skeptical of why are educated people leading our country not using new research, and they just keep using the old
I
stuff.
work
What
for
was
both
the
sides.
What was the response from people that you contacted?
Yeah, and we tried to talk to all of these people, CDC, FDA, all of them, and they asked us, well, what side are you on? This is the response to my interview for, all I said is, we're trying to figure out, 1 billion people are gonna die, we're looking at this situation, will you come on? They said, well, what are you being against? Are you for e-cigarettes or against them? I said, we're just trying to get the information. What did you guys, and they said, no.
Wow. Well, it's definitely already causing a lot of headlines, this documentary. So I want to thank all of you for coming on and sharing information.
Thanks for having us on.
Thanks so
you.
much. I'm Rhonda Schaffler with The Street.